This is Alex here with you, and I'm delighted to welcome John Newman, a Melbourne show business legend, John Newman OAM. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. Isn't it lovely out here?
It is indeed. John, you've been in show business. Well, you were basically born into show business.
Pretty well. My father was a terrific hotelier.
Down in Geelong?
Down in Geelong, all over Victoria. He and my mother were... it was a funny situation. Mm-hmm. They would go into a small country town like Koroit or Bairnsdale, mm-hmm. or any of those small towns, yes. out of Horsham, Ararat, places like that. They'd ask which was the worst hotel in the whole town.
Yes.
And they'd say, the commercial hotel. They'd go there and they'd have a mother, of course, she wasn't allowed in the bar. She'd sit outside in the passageway as they used to and have a lemon squash. and my father went in and he'd sit in the bar and look at it and say, this is pretty crappy. Mm. And my mother would wander down and have a look in the kitchen and the dining room and then sometimes go upstairs and look at the bedrooms. And then my father would say, I'll give you £200 for this hotel in 1 month's time. Mm. And they'd say, oh, yes, that's pretty good. Then the two of them would get in there, they'd clean it up. My father was a terrific hotel keeper. And people got to know him, EJ they called him, Edward John.
Right.
And he then would, my mother would get the boarding fixed up and the dining room fixed up, and suddenly it'd be running, it'd be the best hotel in the town. Then they'd put it on the market.
Yes.
And they'd go on to the next town.
Right.
And he had 9 hotels all told.
Really?
And he loved show business people.
Right.
And the big one that we had, the last one, was the Phoenix Hotel in Geelong.
In Geelong?
In Geelong, yeah. And this was right down the Moorabool Street, the main street, right down near the water. And it's where all the tents used to pitch. Right down the bottom there.
Oh, and the shows, the travelling shows.
Yeah, and of course they all used to stay at our hotel.
Right.
And I remember all people like Mo and Jim Gerald and George Wallace and, Gloria Dawn and Max Reddy, Stella Lamond. I knew all of them.
Yes.
And every Sunday night we had a little private lounge room, and my father would invite them in, and of course my brother Bill Newman, Bill only died a year or so ago,
yes,
and he was nearly 90, and he had a beautiful voice right from the word go, and Bill and I would do a couple of numbers on the ukulele, and then I remember one couple, a father and daughter, she was a contortionist, so he started to hold her up in the air on one hand, and the legs were sticking all directions,
How lovely.
And they did their bit of their contortion act, and then a couple called Grundon and Spicer. They were brought out as lead act for the Tivoli.
Oh, yes.
And Harry Grundon would sit at the piano and play. He's a great pianist. And I remember as a young kid sitting on his knee while he's playing the piano, and Les Pierce singing. It was a really good act. Anyway, they taught us a couple of numbers, and the following 6 months they came back again, stayed at the hotel, and they said, we did the number for them, Bill and I, Bill playing the ukulele, and they said, why don't you come with the show?
Yeah.
We're going down to Colac and Camperdown, and we'll go down there and you can join us.
What age would you have been at that?
I'd have been probably 11 or 12.
Right.
And
so you go on tour with them?
Yeah, I went on tour with them, and it was funny. We went to Colac and we did really well.
Yeah.
Thursday night, they said, look, we're going just down to Camperdown, which is only 15, 20 minutes down the road. Mm-hmm. And in the car, it was a big American car, and we had Buddy Waikara. He was a Hawaiian guy, and he had a couple of very suspect big birds, and they had these huge, had the skirts on made out of raffia, and then somewhere inside that raffia was me sitting. I'm trying to fight my way out of the raffia. And we went down, and Harry Grundon, who was playing the piano, he said, look, when you get down there, we're only going to do the show and get back out, stay back in Colac again. So he said, go straight up on the stage and I'll do the introduction. So we went up on the stage, the girls had their skirts on and I had my funny hat on. I was a comic, and a couple of other Barry Sanford, Barry Sanford, and Jewish comedian, funny guy. Anyway, we stood on the stage and he started the opening, and the curtain opened up. We opened the curtain because we then ran on stage. You did everything yourself.
Of course.
And suddenly we looked up and there's only the fireman, his wife and his dog sitting in the theatre. And Harry Grundon was convulsed with laughter. He hadn't told anybody there was no one there. And it was the grand final of Harry Durst's Australian Amateur Hour.
Oh, on the radio.
Yeah. And everyone was at home watching it.
Listening, yeah.
And we had nobody.
Oh,
so we
my.
got back in the car, this great big American Continental, and on the way back we're almost to Colac, and all of a sudden the engine boiled. And Buddy Waikara said, "Oh God, I haven't got any water. We're not going to get any water here, and I don't want to blow the engine up."
Yeah.
And in the boot he had a dozen bottles of red wine.
Oh, no.
So we poured all the red wine, and we came in. The smoke was pouring out, and it smelled like a brewery. You know,
Dear, oh dear.
funny.
That was fun. They would have been fun times,
Oh,
John.
they were marvellous.
You were talking about that Hawaiian music was very big around the 30s, wasn't it?
Very,
we
very
had a lot of bands in Melbourne. I remember there was quite a few Hawaiian bands.
Oh yeah. It was very big, like everything. It comes around in a circle. I
It
don't think that came back in a circle.
No, it didn't. It didn't. It stayed away. So how did you move on from that as an 11 or 12-year-old child? How did you become into show business that we know it now?
There was a show came through, stayed at the hotel again, and it was called Variety on Parade.
Yes.
And it was run by the Broadway family, and it was to raise money for the Royal Institute for the Blind.
Right.
And they had one blind man in there that played piano. His name was Perce Roberts.
Right.
And he was a great fun bloke. And we used to we played a different town every night for 6 weeks.
Good heavens.
And that includes Sunday. And then we'd take a week off.
Right.
And then we'd do it every night for 6 weeks. And it'd be packed all the time because they used to send a blind man in with a sighted person.
Right.
About 5 o'clock into the hotels in the town that we would eventually play in a month or so.
Ah, yes.
And with raffle tickets.
Right.
The girl or the man would say, "I've got Perce Roberts here, a blind." Well, they used to say blind person in those days.
Yes.
They're a little bit correct now.
Yes.
And we'll be coming here with Perce in a little while to do a show for you at the Railway Institute Hall, and the tickets are 2 shillings each. And they'd sell hundreds of them. Look, these guys were they're half drunk as it was. They'd put the ticket in their pocket and that's it. They'd forget about it. So we'd come into town a month later hoping that nobody remembered the tickets because we'd sell 4,000 tickets and there'd only be 300 seats.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
That's how it worked. And I did put up the speakers and did the microphones, and Johnny Broadway put up the curtains at the back, and we all had our own jobs. We went in one big bus, Alfie Broadway and Etty Broadway in front, Alfie would drive of this bus.
Yeah.
Then in the next one there'd be Johnny Broadway, his sister Shirley Broadway, and then in the back would be Perce Roberts and me. And we had all the costumes on board and all the props and everything.
But that's learning the business, isn't it?
That was learning the business. I did that for over a year.
Yeah.
And I wanted to move on because I was getting up 19 years of age by then.
Yes.
And I thought I'll try the Tivoli. I'd worked out a good act, a good sort of stand-up act. I'd do an impersonation of George Formby with a banjo uke.
Oh, yes.
And then I'd do Groucho Marx and people who were well known.
Was David N. Martin in charge of that?
Yes, he was, and Ginger James was the director, stage
yes.
director.
Yes.
And I remember I went in this day and I was waiting outside. There was another little very gay guy because this was 1947,
Right.
and it was right at the end of the war, and there were no men around. They were all still coming back from overseas, you know.
Yes.
And we only had the little ballet dancers who used to go to the Tivoli and audition.
Yes.
And I was told they don't use microphones, so you've got to sing loud at the audition. So
Project.
I project, yeah. And I had a very loud voice. Oh, really loud voice. And so I got in this little room with Ginger James. He said, "What are you going to sing?" I said, "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" from Oklahoma. You got music? No. Oh, well, the girl here, I'm sure she'd
play by ear.
way it went. And I said, whoa, and I bursted out. And, of course, he said, "No, you're no good. Everybody else has got a little voice, and you're going to be the only one that they'll be able to hear. So, no, no go. And while I was sitting with this little bloke, he said, I'm doing this audition today, and then I'm going up to Her Majesty's Theatre because they're auditioning for a musical called Song of Norway. Life story of Edvard Grieg.
Yes.
So I went up at 12 o'clock. I naturally thought it was a big audition. And I walked in, and the lady in the stage door box, Gwenny Jolly, she was a lovely lady. She was really tough, and she'd been there for years, and we loved her, Tikki and I. Anyway, because Tikki had been working at Her Majesty's since she was 6 with a show called Blue Mountain Melody with Madge Elliott and Cyril Richards, a story about Australia.
Wonderful.
And her job as a little girl, 6 years of age, in a swimsuit and a bucket and spade, was to go in there, and they had sand all over the stage, and clear a thing because a bunyip was going to fly out of there. And that was her job. And I remember her telling me one matinee, they had the Prince of Wales. He was the Prince of Wales then, and he's the one that let the throne go.
Yes.
And he was there, and at an interval they had a cup of tea for him backstage, and he had a plate with 3 cakes on it. He said, would you take this plate of cakes to that little girl that was scraping the sand away? And, of course, the cakes came round. The waitress, she was, the Prince of Wales, and Tikki had those cakes in a Fowler's Vicola jar, and they gradually disappeared. And they had that for years and years. And
so how'd you go with Song of Norway?
Song of Norway. Well, once again, Gabriel Joff was the musical director of it, and he called me through, and he said, "What voice do you have?" And I said, "What voice do you want?" And for the next 30 years of me being at Her Majesty's Theatre and with J C Williamson, Gabriel Joff said, "And Mr. Newman, what voice are you using in this show?" And I would always say, "And what voice do you want, Mr. Joff?" Maestro. And this became a running gag with us. And that's how I got into that. And I went into the dressing room, and there were all the ballet dancers, all the boys bouncing around and kicking their legs up in the air. And there was one seat vacant, and that was I sat down and I said to the bloke, "Do you mind if I sit here?" I said, "I don't care where you sit." And that was Darrell Stewart, who was saying, "I met a man called Peter." Yeah. And Darrell, that was 60 years ago, and Darrell and I are still friends. Darrell was living up in a retirement village up on the Gold Coast, and I was only talking to him yesterday, telling him I was coming in to do this.
Tell him that we still play that song on this radio station.
Good, I'll do that.
It's one of my favourites. I've got the original 45 release of it, but of course it's subsequently been released in different other formats. But wonderful song.
Oh yeah, it was a great song. Yeah. We have a club up in Queensland on the Gold Coast.
Yes,
and it's called the Side Splitters.
Right,
and it's all the old comedians. We meet once a month. I'm the patron of it now.
Oh, lovely.
Because I can't get up there to every meeting.
No,
and everyone tells the same gags, and we all laugh the same way. We've heard every gag. And I always remember Maury Fields when he was working with Tikki and John.
Yes.
He'd be sitting in the bar with me after, we'd be chatting after the show, and the fellow would come up and say, "Hey, Maury!" He said, "I've heard it."
Now,
it's so used.
Was it at the Princess where you met Tikki?
No, I met Tikki for the first time. She was engaged to Darrell Stewart.
Ah.
And we went to see, oh no, wait a minute, get it right. She was in the Borodansky Ballet,
right,
at the Royal Theatre in Sydney.
Because she was a great dancer.
Oh, she was a beautiful dancer. And then Darrell and I were at the Empire Theatre in those days.
Yes.
It then became the Haymarket, and it's now Her Majesty.
Yes.
And we finished that night. We were due to open, and the rehearsal finished early. And we ran up to caught the last bit of the Borodansky Ballet, and then this cute little girl came out with a little hat on and gloves, and the three of us went off to Carl's, Chihills, Carl's, and had a chocolate and strawberry milkshake, and we had a real fun day, laughing, and then came South Pacific. I had done by that time Song of Norway, Annie Gets a Gun with
Right.
Hayes Gordon and Evie Hayes.
Yes.
And then this was the big post-war musical, South Pacific.
South Pacific.
600 people turned up for auditions. Wow. They needed 8 girls, 8 boys.
Yes.
And the fellow who produced it, an American guy, he got the stage manager to bring in 20 people at a time, boys first, then girls, then boys, then girls. And he'd line them all up, and we'd all been checked out that we could sing. And then he walked along, and he touched one there, and he touched another one on the head, and he said, "Now the rest of you," his name was Aitken, Charles Aitken, "the rest of you can all piss off."
Yes.
He said, "because I know what your faces are, and don't come back in again because I'll shoot you straight out." So that was it, you know. He was really tough. And then they'd bring 20 girls in, and they'd take one girl or nobody, you can all go. And he wanted just characters. And I was about 8 stone wringing wet. I was a little skinny bloke with a big voice.
Yeah.
And so I got in. Darryl got in because he had this great tenor voice.
Yes.
Tikki got in. And when he'd picked the 16, 8 girls, 8 boys, we went up to the social room, they called it. It's where all the rehearsal was, in Her Majesty's Theatre, Melbourne. And Gabriel Joff, the musical director, said, "Now I want every one of you to turn to the person on your left and turn to the person on the right, tell your own name and shake hands." So we did all that, and I turned around and there was this tiny little girl, 5'11", 4'11", and I said, "My name is John Newman," and she said, "I know. I met you with Darryl Stewart. I'm Joyce Taylor." And that's where it came. Now, she was Joyce Taylor. She hated the name, and I only ever used it when I was angry with her. And her mother was a lovely lady, except that she, I don't know what you call it, not spoonerism, but she got things back to front.
Yes.
When she spoke.
Yes.
And she used to sit in the passageway waiting to go home with Tikki. You know, because Tikki she did way back, that what I told you, when she was 6. Then she got into the pony ballet when she was 11, 12, 13, 14. Then she went into the big ballet when she was 15, 16, 17, and then suddenly she was in White Horse, then No, Nanette, then all the big musicals during the war.
Yeah.
And her mother used to come in with her and take her home every night.
Good heavens.
And the stage manager saw her sitting in the passageway. He said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I sit here every night waiting to take Joyce home." And he said, "Look, just go to the box office every night and say, 'A ticket for Mrs. Taylor.' And they'll have a seat for you. You may as well sit out and see the show." So she went up and she was nervous and she said, "Could I have a Taylor for Mrs. Ticket?" And, of course, they called her Mrs. Ticket, and they wrote Mrs. Ticket on her ticket every night.
Right.
And they'd go, "Oh, Mrs. Ticket." And, of course, little Tikki. That's where that came, Little Ticket, and then it became Tikki.
That's where it came from.
Yeah,
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, and then Sir Frank Tate in The Pyjama Game, because Tony Lamond was the leading lady.
Yes.
She played the part of Babe, and my brother Bill played the part of Sid Sorokin. And Tikki played the part of Gladys. And Sir Frank Tate says, "Toni for Tony. You can't have Tikki for Tikki. It's too close." So he changed it as Tikky. He didn't like the Y in it. He said, "No, we'll change it to Tikki."
So
And that's how it
all came about.
Yeah.
So you ended up getting married.
When we were in Sydney, we went to a nightclub one night after the show, and it was Checkers nightclub in
famous now,
Castlereagh Street.
Yes.
And we went in there with we knew one of the waiters in there, and we went down there, and he beckoned to us for a seat, and we went in, and we met the Sadlier twins. They were 2 boys that used to do tap dancing together, and his name was Huey Sadlier. Well, I'd met Huey before,
Right.
And of course we loved the show, and Huey came over and joined us after they'd worked, and they weren't brothers. They weren't twins. They were brothers, and on the I said we could do an act and do something like that. So we put an act together, and we auditioned for Dennis Wong, who ran Checkers nightclub, funny man, and after the show one night, we went there and we said, to audition, we'll do a free show for you. You can see what we do.
Yeah.
And the first thing we did, Tikki, we did a dance number together that we'd learnt from Tibor Rudas.
Yes.
He was a great choreographer, went to Broadway, of course, and opened a huge studio, and that was the biggest thing in America.
Yes.
Tibor, and we'd paid £20 to have this routine, a sort of a bebop routine.
Right.
And it was very good, a good routine. And anyway, we went there, we did that act that night, and after we did the dance routine, Tikki did "How much is the dog in the window?" Woo, woo! And she had a great little laugh. And he said, "Mr. Wall, want to see you." This is a little boy from the office. "He want to see you in the Opitz. You go to the Opitz, he's in there." So we went down to the Opitz, and there he was. He said, "Very, very good act, but I don't like the bark." And Tikki said, "Well, the bark's what it's all about. That's the funny part." He said, No, very good song, very funny. Don't like the bark. Cut out the bark." So, okay. And I had a tartan dinner suit on, and it was patterned on one that was worn by King George VI, black lapels, but red Royal Stuart tartan. Really looked great, and I thought I was ready. He said, "And I don't like the tartan blazer. Don't like that blazer. Get a black. Black's much better." And he said, "Everyone likes black." I said, No, what about the Woman's Weekly? That's all in colour." He said, "Yeah, Woman's Weekly, 100,000 every week. The Herald, 100,000 every day. Black and white."
Yes.
So anyway, the two boys, we got into the show, and the Sadlier twins are in there, and they're, what do you call them, unison dancers. They absolutely dance in unison. And he called them into the office, and we were just sitting outside. We heard the conversation. He said, "Very good act, but you both do the same thing, so I only want one." A true story.
I love it.
So they took it in turns. They still got the same money, but he didn't like the two of them doing the same thing.
Isn't that amazing? So let's move on a little bit. What year did Tikki and John... I'm sure that there'll be so many people out there listening to us who went to Tikki and John's in Exhibition Street.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 1960 that we started, and funnily enough, I'm writing a book at the moment, and not for sale. It's just a book to pass on to my
Memoirs.
grandchildren, and their grandchildren, so that they'll at least know what Tikki and I did, because we had a fantastic life.
Right.
Oh, unbelievable! We did everything we wanted to do. My aim was to play the London Palladium. Tikki's aim was to be in the Sadler's Well Ballet. They were the two big things. She never made the Sadler's Well Ballet because Colonel de Basel, who was a great ballet master, was coming to Australia, and he was going to be on the panel that were going to pick girls to go to the Sadler's Wells in London.
Right.
And Tikki was a beautiful dancer, and she worked so hard. She swagged it from school for that week and went into Jenny Brennan's school to dance and worked every day. And about 2 hours before Colonel de Basel was going to see them, she twisted her knee. And she couldn't walk, and her leg blew up like a basketball. And they got the doctor in, and the doctor said, "You better learn how to use the typewriter. You'll never dance on stage again." And yet it wasn't long in the Pyjama Game that she danced the choreography of Bob Fosse.
Right.
And she was the first to do it. But, it was always fun for her to say, "I'm the first to dance Fosse in Australia." But before the Pyjama Game opened, we were rehearsing, and we got an invitation to go down to the George Hotel in St Kilda.
Yes.
Because the drag queens were all doing numbers down there. And when we sat down, and they gave Tikki a really good seat, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden they came out and did Steam Heat. This is the Bob Fosse, to let us know that we've had other people do it before you. Yeah. And the girl ran out, and her feet went from underneath her, and she went right bang on her back. Oh, and Tikki jumped up on stage and lifted her up, and then they spotted Tikki with her, and that made her very popular.
How wonderful. How wonderful. Yeah. So Tikki and John's, you had a lot of very interesting and talented people work there.
Oh, golly.
Through the years.
Just interesting. Just before we opened our own show, and Tikki was away in New Zealand with our two boys at that time. There was still another girl to come, and we had. I was there with the coffee lounge, Tikki and John's coffee lounge, where the stars met. Well, the stars never met. They were too lousy. They wouldn't. I put a room up the back, a green room, so that in matinee they would come in there and sit in there and have a coffee and toasted sandwich or something like that. And one day I went up there and 4 of them opened paper bags. They'd brought their own sandwiches and one fell out a thermos of coffee. I said, "Get out of here, the lot of you miserable buggers," and I kicked them all out. Yeah, it was funny. But that was 1964, and the first show that went in was Peter Homewood. He was a producer, a young producer, and he came into me one day and he said, "Look, we do." Tikki and I were playing on the ukulele, and we used to play for supper time.
Yeah.
And she used to run up from, as soon as the curtain dropped at Hello Dolly at a Majesty's, we were about 100 metres away.
Yes.
She'd run up the back lane, change her frock, and she'd be standing there as the people walked past.
Oh, wonderful.
And they said, "That's Tikki. We've just seen her in Hello Dolly." And the people they'd look in and they'd see us and they'd look through the lace curtains and nobody in there, you see. And I said, "Oh, got to do something about that." And I went down to the Herald and I said to the girl, "Look, I'm looking for photos of stars that are seated." And she said, "Oh, well, we'll go through them." And in those days, that's what they didn't have computers, 1964.
Yes, exactly.
And out came Bert Newton. He's sitting there talking to somebody with a microphone. Graham Kennedy, Frank Thring, Robert Helpman. All these people were all sitting. And I got the photos of them, and I got a friend of mine at a printing works called Show Ads Amiga, and Bill Sidwell, his name was, a lovely guy, and a regular customer. That's why I asked him. And he blew them up to life size, and then I cut them, stuck them on 3-ply, and then cut them out. And I used to stand them on the seats, sit them on the seats.
I love it.
People would look through and they'd say, "Oh, there's Graham Kennedy in there." And, of course, the people would come in and they'd suddenly see, and I'd say, "And who do you want to sit with, Frank Thring or Robert Helmet?" And they used to laugh about it, you know. And they'd sit with them and, you know, we'd take photos of them and all that.
Wonderful.
So that's how we got started. And then the first show that went in had Betty Bobbitt.
Yes.
Remember, she worked with the D-Lo and Daly show.
That's right.
She was a Canadian girl.
She went on to Betty Bobbitt. Didn't she go into Prisoner?
No. Yes, she did. She
did.
played one of the girls in Prisoner.
Yeah.
Then there was Terry Gill and his wife, Carol Aylett, and Terry Norris.
Yes.
Was the other one. And that show was really good. I liked it. And that was the start of us starting to think about, we'll put our own show on.
Yes.
We had a piano there because I used to sell pianos, and one I couldn't sell, I had to keep it. And it was sitting down there,
good. That's fair enough.
somewhere for the girls to put their trays on it.
Yeah.
You know? So we put that over a bit, and Johnny Machetti, the head mechanist of the J C Williamson, he came up with Maxie Morrison, and one lunchtime they built a little corner stage for us.
How wonderful.
So we then did that show. And funnily enough, about 2 weeks ago, we had the 50th anniversary of the opening of that show, and my daughter Haydee rang all the people that were involved in the beginning, got them all together on the site of the new Tikki and John's, and we had a terrific party. Betty Bobbitt was there. Terry Gill was there and died 2 weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later.
He did, yeah.
Maxie Morrison and Johnny Machetti there. Maxie Morrison died a month after that.
Good heavens.
You know, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Val Delay was there, and, it was good to see Val. I hadn't seen her for a while.
Because she's the widow of
Maury Fields.
Maury
of
Fields,
course, yeah.
yes.
And used to dance with Bob Horsfall, who's
here.
The program.
That's right, yes.
Program.
Yes, he's here.
I remember that so well. And that's how it was, how it all got started. Tikki came back from Hello Dolly, and then she came into the show because there was nothing in the pipeline for her.
Right.
She was desperate to play Gypsy, and she wasn't a tall stripper. You know, she was a cute little bubbly kid.
Yes.
And she wasn't right. And then the other one she wanted to do was Sweet Charity, that Nancy Hayes was so brilliant in.
Yeah.
And she once again, as Sir Frank Tate said to Betty Pounder, and Betty and Tikki grew up together. They were real mates.
Yes.
And Betty had to say to her, look, I've spoken to Sir Frank, and Sir Frank said, you're not a stripper. There's nothing we can do with you. We'd have to stretch you for a start. And you're just a cute little thing with a little button nose and little bright blue eyes, and you're not going to be able to make charity. And then, of course, the next minute they auditioned Nancy Hayes, and she just tumbled into it. It was absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. Now, of course, Tikki passed away just a couple of years ago, you were telling me, which is sad. But the family,
sad.
All of the family, your family is all in show business, and it's morphed now into Dracula's, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Dracula's was the one we were able to. It was a good step up from what we were doing.
Yes.
We tried a lot of other things in the room when I built a theatre right next door to it, which is an interesting story because we had we could fit 120 people with a shoehorn into Tikki and John's.
Right.
You could just get in there and you could just get out. Yeah. I remember one night a lady had a heart attack. And the only way we could get her out, because everybody put their chairs back to give themselves a bit more room, and we had to pass her over the heads of the crowd to the ambulance. And about 6 months later, she had her hand up, and I said, yeah, what do you want, darling? She said, I had a heart attack in here. I said, are you the one we passed over the heads of the crowd? And she said, that's me, yeah. And so I had this building just next door that was up for sale. There was a Chinese restaurant in between us. And so I was with the architect, Gordon Banfield. We'd been round to the Florentino having lunch, as we did nearly every day, full of wine, of course.
Yes.
And we came back and the auction was on. And Banfield said to me, buy it, I'll build you another theatre. I said, I haven't got any money. It doesn't matter. He said, you'll get the money. And so I put my hand up and they said, the gentleman in the purple suit and the winkle picker boots on. He said, yes, there. That was me. And Banfield, bid again. I said, yes. Okay. Anyway, I bought the block for $109,000. You know, now it's worth $2 million.
Yeah, easy.
It's unbelievable. $3 million. Yeah. And so all of a sudden he said, let's design, we'll pull the whole thing down put a hole in the ground, make downstairs the kitchen, the bar and toilets, which we did. Ground floor, from the back wall of the stage, which was a mirror, to the back of the theatre was 22 feet. That's all it was. It was like the front of Her Majesty's stage to the other side of the orchestra pit. That's how small it was. And Banfield wrapped the audience around the stage, made the stage big and wide, put a rake on it. Yes. For the people who don't know what a rake is, it's a slope on it so that the people upstairs see the thing. And in the original Tikki and John's, which held 120, when the night we opened, we put all the chairs in that we could, 119. Now, I should have built a theatre that held 400, but I didn't. But I've got one up in Queensland now, the Dracula's, which holds just on 600 people, seated at tables.
That's been a very successful venture, Dracula.
Great one up there. Look, it's mainly people from Melbourne who go up there and say, hey, we're going to have a good time.
I remember years ago going to the venue, which was in Drury Lane.
Drury Lane, yeah, that's just up from the back of Myers.
Several times. And we just, and I was working for a financial institution at the time, and I used to take my staff there. That was a terrific night out at the end of the year, towards the end of the year. A lot of people had their break up functions there, but it was always fun. And I remember there was a little guy, a little midget.
Johnny.
Johnny.
He used to run underneath the table.
That's right.
And the people, you could see the girls go, oh, what was that? And it was little Johnny. And then he'd get up on top of the table and run on the top of the table.
That's it. So you've got Mark,
Paul,
and Haidee.
Mark is our creative director. He writes all the shows. Comes up with the ideas with me. We'll go out and have lunch together and we'll come back with a show.
Right.
Just the two of us talking. Paul will come into that and he puts some good ideas in. He's got a brilliant brain, but he does all the electrics, all the vocal backings. He's the only one in the family that's got a voice.
Right.
And he does all the lighting, all the sound. That's his job. Now, when they get together and they put the show together, and it was lucky, next Monday we start rehearsing on our new show. And then Haidee comes along, she auditions all the people, she gets the cast she wants for that show, and then they start rehearsal. Well, we've got almost a new crew. I think the 2 boys are staying on. We have about 8 in the show, all told. And the others are all spreading their wings. They're going off.
So how long of rehearsal, once you start next, whatever, Monday, how long do you normally rehearse it, get it down pat before it
4
goes
weeks.
on? 4 weeks?
4 weeks. And they work every night as well.
Right.
So they start at
So they've got to
11
do what's on at the moment,
Yeah.
and then during the day they'll be doing the new show.
That's right,
It's a
and
bit
they-
like old repertory, isn't
Oh,
it?
it is absolutely like our repertory. And it's like it was when I was with J C Williamson.
Yes,
You'd
it
come
would be.
back to do a revival of, say, Annie Gets Your Gun in Melbourne at night time, and then at 10 o'clock in the morning you'd be rehearsing the next show.
That's right.
Which was perhaps something like Grab Me a Gondola, which was produced by Johnny Ladd, who your listeners would know very well.
Yes, very well. I was just thinking the Tivoli would be like that too, because the Tiv would have a show. It would turn over fairly quickly.
That's right.
wouldn't it?
Every 4 weeks.
Yeah.
When I was a kid down in Geelong, I used to come up on the first Saturday of every month, and I'd go there. I'd get out of Flinders Street Station. I'd cross the road past the church, and there was George's Oyster Bar, and I'd go and have a dozen oysters with the little triangles of brown bread, and then I'd walk up to Burke Street, turn right, go up to the Tivoli, pay my 6pence and get my single ticket. Then I had to wear long pants. They wouldn't let me in short pants. I was 14, 15. Then I'd go up to Andrade's Magic Shop, which was just 3 or 4 points up, and before Russell Street, and I'd go in there and see the boys, and if they were terribly busy, I used to do the tricks for, go over there, he'll show you how it
works, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. They were great days. There was Bernard's Magic Shop, and there was...
Alf Gertler. I was just, this book I told you that I'm writing, I was just finished this morning editing a thing where I went one Saturday to Alfie Gertler's, Bernard's the magician, and he had a little private room upstairs, and he said, come on up. And I had a bottle of scotch in the bag, and I went in there with him, and I poured him a scotch, and we had a few, 3 or 4 scotches, and he had double ground white pepper. And in other words, he keeps grinding it, getting it, the people
Really
who
fine.
do it, keep grinding it until it's so fine, becomes sneezing powder. It floats in the air. So we had little plastic bags and a spoon, a plastic spoon, and we'd put a spoonful in, and then we'd staple it over, And we had the tears rolling down our cheeks. We were drunk out of our brains, and we're still trying. And he was putting most of it on the floor because he'd missed the hole, Oh, God, it was funny. I had so many funny. And I used to make all sorts of things for him because I loved props. I still do.
Yeah.
My flat, which is right next to the Princess Theatre, if you go in there, it's like a workshop. I'm working on some new things to go into this.
To the new show.
This new thing that we're going to put in Lonsdale Street.
That's right, yeah.
It's going to be a walk-through tourist attraction.
Now, John, tell me a little bit. You said before we started, ask me about remembering names. You've got a story about remembering names.
When we did Tikki and John's Music Hall Theatre Restaurant, we followed what we had seen when we went to London, the playhouse, they called it, and it was the old-time musical. Go, me little girlie, are there any more at home like you?
Florodora, yes.
Yeah, and they do all those songs, I'm only a bird in a gilded cage, and we came back with it, so we die with that in Australia, it's so old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So we did a bastardised version of Music Hall, but we brought it all up to date by doing Tivoli sketches and all things like that. And I got to a point where I walked out and sat in the box, and I'd hit the cymbal. I had the cymbal, I had the clackerboards, I had the bell and the triangle, and I also did all the lights from there.
Right.
I'd switch them on and off.
Yeah.
And I'd say, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Music Hall. It is my pleasure to introduce them one by one, each individually by themselves alone, in the hope that you may applaud them before you meet them, count that you may not after you do. And, of course, I don't know how I can remember that. And then I'd introduce Vic Gordon, Myrtle Roberts, who was just marvellous.
Granny Davis?
And Tiki and myself, that's the reason people came there, for that package. Yes. It wasn't just Tiki and John, it was that package. Yeah. And Because while the others were performing, I'd be looking around the audience and people would shoot lines to me and they'd say, "What do you think of red china?" And I'd say, "It looks lovely on a white tablecloth," all the old gang.
Yes.
And I started to get to know people and I say, "Oh, hi, nice to have you back again, Rod. You were down here last time you came in." And my mind was photographing every night. And because we were working 6 nights a week, it never switched off.
Yes.
And we did that for just on 20 years.
Good heavens.
And on the last day, I remember we'd had a fantastic audience in, and we were both really very tired. And we went downstairs and I went and got a bottle of champagne and I poured a glass for Tikki and a glass for myself. They'd all gone home, there were only 2. We clinked the glasses, had a drink, and I looked at Tikki and I said, "Is that it?" She said, "I'd like it to be it." "We finish?" She said, "Yeah, I'm ready to finish." And I said, "Okay, this is it. We finish this next Saturday night." And then, of course, my brain went into overload. Let's call it the Vaudeville Theatre Restaurant, and we'll get Maury Fields and Val Gillet and Colin McEwen.
God, there's a name.
And so many more people that came in. I had a lovely little, finished up, she was a concert pianist, and she came in, she was 16 and she was terrified, but she needed money to do her class, and she came in and played the piano for us. Nahama Patkin.
The late Nahama Patkin.
And he died
passed
just
away.
recently.
Yes.
So that was it. And then from that point on, I couldn't remember names. My brain wouldn't allow me to go searching amongst all the porridge in there to find people's names. And I'd say to people, as I did, I came in, first thing I said to you is, "Hello, Alan," and your name's Alex. Yeah. It's awful. But I can remember everything else about, the history of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Nahama Patkin, she did a couple of years with John Finlayson at the zoo, doing Noel Coward at the zoo.
Yeah, that's
Do you
right.
remember
She
that?
toured with him, yeah.
Yes, that was wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah,
She was a
right.
brilliant pianist.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant pianist.
And we can imagine her at 16 and coming into the music hall, the plonking away at that old stuff. And she had to have music. She couldn't do anything ad lib.
Yeah. No. Well, there's some people like that. But look, John, we've run out of time, but it has been an absolute pleasure
Oh, I've loved every minute of it.
talking to you and remembering old times. And as I say, our demographic is mainly seniors, and a lot of them would have been to Tikki and John's, and a lot would have been to your current venture, Dracula's.
Yeah.
And I wish you and the family every success in going forward with your new one that's coming up later on.
Yeah, we're coming up the 1st of November, I think.
It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Thank you again, John Newman.
Thank you.